Welcome to the Passive House podcast, brought to you by Passive House Accelerator, a catalyst for zero carbon building. For news, inspiration, and connections from all flavours of Passive House, check out passivehouseaccelerator.com. Sign up to receive regular updates about events, get your technical questions answered, and contribute to the community forum. There's loads of free information for experienced professionals and people just starting out on their Passive House journey. We hope to see you at one of our construction, tech, or weekly Global Passive House Showcase webinars. In the meantime, here's this week's Passive House podcast. Welcome back to the Passive House podcast, our official episode 101, which is very exciting. I'm Matthew Cutler-Welsh, coming to you from a bit of a wet, windy Auckland.
I am Zack Semke, coming to you from a beautiful, sunny Seattle, Washington. And welcome to season 3 of the Passive House podcast.
Season 3.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Thanks for making
this happen, Matthew.
And it was great to have Michael on the show last week, who really kicked off the accelerator and allowed everything else to happen around Passive House Accelerator, which is pretty amazing work. So go back and have a listen to that one if you haven't already. And if you're a bit confused, this is our 101 episode number, but there are, I think, over 150 individual shows in the feed because of those extra little conference interviews that you did and various other ones that we've stuck in there as well. So awesome stuff.
Indeed.
Well, we've got another great interview to get into this week, but before we do that, we've got a few other people to thank.
Yes, indeed. So everything we do at the Accelerator, including the Passive House podcast, comes thanks to generous support from our sponsors. So a big thank you to our founding sponsors, 475 High Performance Building Supply, Bax Ingwe Architects, Glavel Foam Glass Gravel, Minutair All-in-One HVAC and Dehumidification Units, Mitsubishi Electric Train HVAC US, Partel, Rockwell North America, Stocorp, and Zola Windows. Thanks also to our champion sponsors, Icon Windows and Doors and Proseco. And thank you to our stakeholder partner, NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority.
Well, there's so much going on in Passive House world all the time now, and we never get a chance to get through it all. And there's a lot of great stories that pop up in my Google alert that I have set up for Passive House. Every day I'm almost reading stories. So I thought for this season 3, we'd kick off with an extra little segment here of Passive House highlights for the week. And it just gives us a chance to share anything that's captured our attention or nice stories from anywhere around the place. So do you want to kick off, Zach? You got what's your Passive House highlight?
Yeah, sure. It's sort of Passive House adjacent, but certainly Passive House related. So, President Biden signed the Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA, into law this week, which is massively huge news for us in the United States and really exciting. And one of the things that it does is offer a whole bunch of incentives to households, individual households, for decarbonization, both in their houses and also in their transportation, with at least with electric vehicles. So there is a cool resource that I wanted to share that is called the Household Electrification Savings Calculator. So if you're in the US, you can use this to get an estimate of the kinds of incentives that you are probably entitled to. This is a resource that Rewiring America has provided, and that's at rewiringamerica.org. And we'll include a specific link in the show notes. But the savings calculator, you put in your zip code, your homeowner status, your household income, and your household size, and it calculates an estimate for total incentives. So, for example, our household is probably entitled to about $19,312 in incentives that are coming from the IRA, and that's for things like whole home energy reduction, a performance rebate more weatherization, heat pump water heater, a tax credit for heat pump for AC and heating, potentially new electric vehicle credit. So all sorts of really exciting new incentives available for decarbonization of your house. And so check it out.
That's exciting, right up through to the sort of federal implications of that. But for you individually, is that going to change your likelihood of doing something?
I think we were committed to. We're looking at a remodel right now, and in the next couple of years, and so I think we were committed to doing this, probably honestly anyway. It will certainly make that decision even more economically viable. I mean, all this stuff already pencils. If these investments already pencil if you look on a long enough time horizon, but this just makes the payback happen that much faster. So and
it makes it a lower barrier to entry for people to even think about doing some of that stuff.
No, absolutely, and we're this is something that's near and dear to our hearts, so we're already kind of sold. But I think what's exciting is for folks who may not have been thinking about decarbonization as seriously as we were, or I think another thing that's really good about the way this is structured is that the incentives are really most generous for lower income families, and they start kind of disappearing at a household income of 300,000 and higher. So this is not for these aren't for the real wealthy, which I think is just so smart. So good stuff.
That's exciting. I mean, that's a significant amount of potential subsidy. Allows you to do some really significant improvements. That's very cool. I mean, it's cool to see those high level policies, massive numbers that are just hard to relate to, actually trickle down into something that's tangible at a household level.
Yeah, definitely.
Very exciting.
How about you?
Okay, well, I came across this little story which I really like. So in our office, we had a couple of interns recently, which is nice because it reminds us in the middle of winter here that it's actually summer break in America. We had amazing 2 students from California come over as part of their summer intern. But there's a program that just took place in Pittsburgh, which was a joint collaboration with Southwest College in Ireland. And they did a 3-week high-performance building summer camp. So this is architecture students coming over from Ireland to spend 3 weeks with some new friends in Pittsburgh. And they learned a whole bunch of stuff, including all about Passive House. And interestingly, the college in Ireland has some experience in that space. So Ern campus in, I'm going to get this butcher this pronunciation probably, in Enniskillen. It's been recognised as the world's largest Passive House premium rated building, which I didn't know about. So that's amazing. And it's also one of the first buildings to join the United Nations High Performance Building Initiative of COP26, which was in Glasgow. So these students coming over from Ireland are coming from a good place in terms of their experience with Passive House already. But there's a couple of quotes in this article saying that they really valued that cultural experience and that exchange of ideas and how things are done differently in a different context, but the underlying principles are, of course, all the same. But I think the thing that really that I really like about this story is that it's harnessing that energy and the passion that's there in a lot of young students that are coming through architecture. And I think it's so valuable for them to realize that other people are doing this and it's being established. They had site tours, they got to go and visit buildings where really good things are happening. And I always worry that sometimes passionate young students get out into the real world in their first graduate job and then are told, forget everything that you learn about all this environmental stuff, and this is how we do things here. And I think this helps to immunize against that and really encourages people to believe in why they chose to become an architect or a designer or a builder, whatever it is, in the first place, and to know that there are people and support around the world to enable them to go down that path and do really good work. So nice little story, and a lot of listeners I think will be familiar with summer camp as far as building science goes, but it's nice to know that there's other flavors and other types of camps or exchanges that are taking place with the sharing of knowledge as well. So very cool.
Yeah, an exciting time to be a new emerging architect or design professional right now. It feels like there's this new momentum. So that's awesome.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing, it's a good reminder of people getting around the place again. Being able to travel and going meet people in different parts of the world and see how things are done too. So that's nice to be back doing that sort of stuff.
Absolutely. Awesome.
All right. Well, that's it. There's obviously a lot more going on, but great to hear some nice little stories. Now we should get into this week's feature interview. Who have we got?
We have Richard Yancey, who is the executive director of Building Energy Exchange, or BX, based in New York City. And BX is a small but mighty institution that is promoting and advancing high performance building in New York City and beyond. It is really a center of learning and best practice. So we dive into that. Richard starts by introducing himself a little bit, so we can I think just jump right into this great interview. I'm a big admirer of Richard's work, so it was a pleasure to get a chance to talk to him. Well, I have the executive director of Building Energy Exchange, BX, here with me. Welcome to the Passive House podcast, Richard Yancey.
Thank you, Zach. It's great to be here.
So I am really excited to be interviewing you, Richard. I've been an admirer of your work for many years, and I'd love to start off by having you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about what Building Energy Exchange is all about.
Well, great. Thank you for inviting me to join. I've been super excited and impressed to see the growth of the Passive House Accelerator and all the great work you guys are doing. The Building Energy Exchange, we're now, I think, 11 years old. And our mission really at its core is accelerating a transition to kind of healthy, comfortable, and energy efficient buildings. Understanding that there is a diverse constellation of individuals who end up influencing decisions related to the operations, the design, the construction of our buildings. And that in order for us to advance that acceleration to these kind of better buildings of the future, it really requires that we create a forum for these people to kind of be able to communicate with each other and understand both the constraints that each other's face, but also then the opportunities that they each have, and empower them to make better decisions about the buildings in general, whether it's new buildings and we spend a lot of time on existing buildings too, and then connect with the resources to actually move those kind of good ideas into action. And so we do that at BX, and I've been very excited, I think, over the years to see this community grow exponentially, and to see it grow even beyond the borders of New York City. But we found, like, you have to kind of meet people where they are, and you have to have lots of different ways that you can connect to people. Like, people are different learners, right? So So we do our work in kind of predominantly a few different areas where we provide programs, whether they're kind of educational and training or just topical events, where you bring experts in to speak about what they're doing and kind of inspire action and give people more confidence to move forward. Or it's kind of fundamentals of like Passive House. That's been a very popular course to kind of give people the vocabulary and understanding about what the standard is. So that's kind of one area on education that we do. And then we do something that we kind of broadly call tools, which is often either pages on our website or printed material about successful projects in the form of a case study, or a kind of an analytical report about like retrofit pathways for multifamily buildings to kind of reach high performance goals. Or it's like the Local Law 97 carbon calculator on our website, which has been wildly successful. And then the third kind of avenue that we use is through exhibits. And that's both physical exhibits that we have at our space in downtown Manhattan, and it's on our website. So we've transformed those physical exhibits to be virtual as well. That really try to demystify kind of energy efficiency. They look at like a typical kind of multifamily building and a typical commercial building and kind of go through what are the kind of different systems in a building that use energy or affect energy usage, and then explain opportunities people have to improve that dramatically, and kind of explain some of the different systems, whether it's like heat pumps or ERVs, in a way that people can understand. I think one of the things that we often say about the work we do, Zach, is we feel we are very much in the kind of place of translating information, because a lot of the information in the built environment space is either coming from someone who's trying to sell you a product, not necessarily bad information, but it's a sales pitch, so you immediately have your defenses up, or it comes from a technical report of some national lab that no one can really understand unless you're a real geek. So we end up, I think, translating that information in a way that a broad community of building decision makers can kind of engage with and understand and use in their daily activities to make better decisions about their buildings.
Yeah. Well, and you've built up an institution that is, I mean, very highly regarded in the community, and highly sought, resources that are highly sought after by and it's a community that is at the forefront of this project of building decarbonization now, or at least more and more of that community is at the forefront. There's this really important transition that you're in New York City are at the leading edge of. So it's exciting to watch and really important work. So could you say a little bit? Well, actually, and the other thing I guess is your offices are in lower Manhattan.
Yeah.
How big is your staff, and what does that
look
like?
Sure. So, I mean, that's an important kind of piece of the puzzle. When we started this project, this organization, at the very end of 2009, then Mike Bloomberg was the mayor of New York, and he and his team had just kind of issued this comprehensive master plan for the city of New York called Plan YC, which incorporated this kind of very ambitious goal at the time of a 30% reduction in carbon emissions across the entire, a New York City carbon footprint. But one of the things that they did is they did a bunch of data analytics, and it was really the first time where we had the data that understood that 70% of New York City's carbon emissions actually came from buildings. So they focused on buildings in some of the kind of legislation that they were in, policy initiatives that they were passing, including this suite of laws called the Green Integrated Buildings Plan, which introduced things like closing loopholes in the building energy code and and requiring buildings to upgrade their lighting to energy efficient lighting in commercial buildings, and requiring buildings to record their energy usage every year so we could gather more data on it. But in addition to those sticks, they also kind of understood that, we needed to support the real estate industry in this transition. And understood that there were some initiatives, especially in California, that had passed Prop 84, in the 90s. That was kind of a big step in their energy code around buildings. Washington State had a very aggressive energy code, and they had created these energy efficient resource centers, mostly run by the utilities in those two states, to kind of help the real estate sector. And so, so that was kind of the underlying premise behind creating an organization like BX. And so it spun out of the Bloomberg administration. At the time, it really had no money and no staff. And so I came on board to help kind of figure out how to get this thing off the ground. The city, we were able to have this great space in downtown Manhattan. It's about 6,000 square feet. We did a capital campaign in the private sector to kind of renovate that and turn it into this very kind of functional, create a big classroom, create this exhibit space, create meeting spaces. We can live stream out of that space. And it was a little bit of a, kind of field of dreams, like build it and they will come, because we didn't really know, there wasn't much of a there. But it turns out there was this community, and this diverse community between architects and engineers and consultants and developers and building owners and operators.
Yeah.
And then that we could kind of, by creating this space to bring people together, and I think very importantly, this kind of neutral space to bring people together, that we could, kind of advance that forum for discourse and raise the bar on people's, education about high performance buildings. And so, fast forward to 2022, we have a staff of 10. I think we've had I think we're getting close to 50,000 people attend our events and programs in the space. And the space really became active in 2014. And then we had a whole pivot during COVID of, really focusing on online. Luckily, we had this online learning platform kind of in development called BX Ed. So we created a series of on-demand, learn at your own pace, at your own time courses, and are continuing to build out and populate that platform. And that's been really successful. And then we are also, because we had developed the capacity in our space, we were able to even go beyond just Zoom for our kind of virtual programming and start to do it live streaming out of our space, more like a studio broadcast.
That's cool.
Where we could get the panel together, or the different speakers and people together to kind of interact in real time, not through the grid,
Yeah.
but then bring in an outside audience at the same time, which has been great. So we'll have these events now in our space where we might have, 20, 40 people in our space, but we might have a couple hundred people, coming in online from all over the country and even the world. But so, we have this tremendously great staff, and we operate out of the exchange in downtown Manhattan, and then we are ramping up more programming carefully as we, continue to navigate this slow
whatever this
emergence
is
from the darker days of COVID to slightly lighter days as things get better and hopefully better and better.
Yeah. So what a story. And before then, so you're talking about coming on, you're the first director, the kind of founding director of BX. So before that, you were practicing as an architect, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what was that? Well, first of all, what was your practice like? And then how did that transition happen? What was that about?
So I very much an architect, for better or for worse. Came out of graduate school and moved to Seattle, Washington, almost directly from graduate school.
I didn't realize that. I'm in Seattle as we record this, so
down. Well, I met my wife, also an architect, in graduate school, and
so were you University of Washington?
No, we were at Harvard. And then actually we kind of looked around when we finished school, and it was in the beginnings of one of the many recessions that we've had to live through. And we're like, well, there are no jobs in New York. Let's go to Seattle. So we moved to Seattle, and by then the recession kind of crashed on the West Coast. So it was,
perfect timing.
Time to start a career. But so that's where I kind of began my career in architecture. Started to work for a very design-oriented firm that really did a mix of different building typologies. We did everything from kind of high-end homes to downtown multi-unit senior housing, mixed-use stuff. It was very interesting work. And like the big project I cut my teeth on was the Seattle Downtown Police Precinct 911 call center.
Wow.
Which won some awards. So, cool. That was a great run, and we worked there for about 11 years, and we had kids, and then we basically had this opportunity to come back to New York. We decided, the kids were the right age. We'd come back and kind of see what that was like. Inger had lived in New York and worked in New York for a little while, so we were interested in that. We always thought we'd move back to Seattle, which we still may do, but it was going to be 2 or 3 years, and we moved here in 2005. So
right.
More than that. So when I moved here, I ended up getting a job with Buyer Blinder Bell, and did something very different that I hadn't done. I did some campus master planning and some master planning of some large projects, which was really exciting. But I guess when I was in Seattle, I discovered what was called then the Seattle Lighting Design Lab. It was co-located really with the Integrated Design Lab, which was supported both by the local utility and by the University of Washington's architecture school.
Was Rob Pena there at that time?
Yeah, and Chris Meek was there, but I'll remember his name, the guy who set it up originally. But as an architect, using that resource, which is free, I thought it was the coolest thing, to help inform the design of my projects. Both to optimize daylight and then also understand how to minimize the HVAC systems. And there was all sorts of, and we're talking about in the 1990s and very early 2000s. It was really, amazing. And so after I moved back here and the administration was kind of putting together this idea of creating BX, which the focus was originally very much on energy efficient lighting. It was actually Yatza Frank who put them in touch with me as someone who might be interested in helping, stand this thing up. And because I'd had this experience with it, it seemed like this great resource that really should be, available to the entire design community. And
cool.
And I think the other kind of piece is this opportunity to try to influence projects at a larger scale, or in a larger scale of projects, as opposed to just what's sitting on my drawing board, kind of one project at a time, and trying to do the best I could with that. This opportunity to kind of reach a much broader audience and raise the bar of people's awareness of the opportunity and the benefits of energy efficiency and high performance building, how that intersects with really good design and better, healthier spaces, and really find that as a kind of challenge was enticing to me.
That is such a great story, and I did not understand the Seattle connection, and that's so. I know Rob Pena from my time when our office at Hammer in Hand was at the Bullet Center, the Living Building Challenge.
Yeah.
And got to know him quite well, and he helped advise on this design competition that we ran around high performance building and high design. So that's really cool. Anyway, that's awesome. So you're at BX, and you have this, kind of longer than most people training and kind of immersion in high performance building. So when were you first introduced to Passive House, and what role has Passive House design and construction started to play in your work, and what's going on at BX?
Yeah, I love the Passive House story, actually. And I feel really, really lucky about my kind of window and kind of, immersion experience of discovering Passive House and its, its promise and possibility. So in 2015, I had the opportunity to go on, it was essentially a fact-finding trip to Brussels. And it actually was with several of your colleagues and cohorts and people from the community. And I can tell you, it was led by Tomas O'Leary, who, of PHA, or I forget, they changed their name. Mozart, thank you. And on that trip, part of the reason I got to go out on it was essentially in my capacity in our relationship to the city of New York, because there was some funding available through this thing called the Carbon Neutral Cities Alliance, of which New York is one, that kind of brought people to share information and learn things and share knowledge. And the kind of green building manager for the city of Vancouver, British Columbia, Sean Pander, was on that trip, as well as, so he was representing Vancouver. I was on that trip, and then a bunch of people, this is when the Roosevelt Island,
Cornell Tech
project was just an idea that Related was designing for the Cornell Tech school. And so Luke Falk from Related was on that trip to kind of see what's this Passive House about, and are we really going to be able to pull this off in New York? Lois Arena from Stephen Winter Associates. She was actually the only Passive House person at Stephen Winter Associates at the time, and now I don't know. She has like 50 people working for her. Something. And then several other architects, some from New York, some from Seattle. Actually,
was D. Walsh from Reach CDC on that trip? No, okay.
I don't think so. No.
Yeah.
But the cool thing about that trip, the premise is that Brussels had just adopted the Passive House building standard for all new construction and substantial innovation. And it was like, okay, how did they do this?
Yeah.
And as Morena Vaca likes to say, there was not a revolution in the street.
Right. When it happened, chaos did not ensue.
No, so Sebastian says that every time he talks about it and shows a slide of empty streets. But and that really was what it was about. And so we got to tour a bunch of projects that had happened, and we got to talk to the Minister of the Environment, and then we got to talk to architects and building developers and really understand, like, how did this happen? And it was really interesting. They had this whole 7-year project, long runway before that of their Bâtiment Exemplaire, the kind of Buildings of Excellence program competition, which over time had awarded money and awards to projects. They had 250 projects that had been awarded money to be high performance. So they had this kind of body of built examples, and then, understanding what they did to change the code and all the kind of incentives that they did. And so, I was kind of blown away by that, and came back put together my slide deck and went around and told we hosted programs at BX. I went up to NYSERDA and pitched it. I went into the mayor's office and pitched it and said, this is amazing. We need to figure this out. And I like to think that that kind of spreading of that word planted a lot of seeds and kind of possibilities, people saying like, this is possible,
Mm-hmm.
and then like Luke and Lois came back and they and the rest of their team built Cornell Tech, and that was a New York built example, and they figured it out, right? But so NYSERDA has a program called Buildings of Excellence, right? Where they're giving these actual real cash dollar awards to people to create these built examples. The city adopted an energy code that I don't think a lot of people are aware of, but we've been trying to make that in 2025 moves to a predicted based energy code, which is basically based on a passive house building standard for all buildings over 25,000 square feet. So, that's going to happen in 2 years now.
Right.
and so I think just seeing the standard and seeing what had been done with it in Belgium, and then kind of the window into the larger community of PHI and kind of what's happening generally in Europe and elsewhere was really eye-opening. And so this kind of like opportunity to take as much of that information and showcase it at BX, both in terms of things like our Passive House Primer, which is like this lunch and learn, so people can like basic developers who may not be familiar with what passive is can start to understand it, or bringing in teams to explain how they did things like Cornell Tech, or now some of the new projects that are coming online, and give the larger New York community confidence that this is doable, that it's doable within project budgets. And not only that, there's all these upside benefits out of it with, healthier buildings, lower operating costs, and now with Local Law 97, coming online with carbon emission limits that are going to start to kick in a couple years, there's even more upside to it. So it was that first trip, and I feel so fortunate to have gone on it in 2015 to see it in action. And now I'm super excited to see just how exponentially the community's grown here, as is evidenced, quite frankly, by you guys and your accelerator. It's now part of that kind of whole movement.
Well, the impact of that trip was really profound. I mean, what you guys all did in New York, and then to see what Sean Pander and others have accomplished in Vancouver, BC. And then, all these other their little examples elsewhere too. It was really, really important kind of replication of this amazing model that they've figured out in Brussels. So it's a powerful story. So speaking of what's going on in New York now, what is kind of at the forefront of your work in the city with BX? What's hot for you right now? Several things.
Clearly, the Climate Mobilization Act that passed right before the pandemic in 2019, which includes the green roof law, the building grades, and most importantly, Local Law 97, the carbon emission limits, is a real kind of driver. And I think we feel in our role as kind of an explainer and an educator and a word spreader and a resource, giver, a real drive to help as many people as possible understand that this law exists and what it means and how it's going to affect them, and then pivot to, and here's what you can do about it. So we created this primer around the Climate Mobilization Act that is it's kind of a very simple explanation of what it is, and that's now available on BX Ed, and we also continue to give that because there's a lot of people who still don't even understand that law is happening. And then we connect with as lots of resources to help people understand how to meet the requirements of that law, in terms of retrofit guidance for existing buildings and kind of guidelines on, new construction, and connecting them with people who can help them navigate that, in many different ways. And so we also created this Local Law 97 carbon emission calculator on our website. So you can go on our website and see what the impact of this law might be in terms of the potential fines. And then that kind of will steer you toward resources. And, and we do kind of help steer people toward the New York City program, the New York City Accelerator, that additionally is available of this free service that the city offers to kind of help building owners understand what they can do and connect them with resources and things like financing, the CPACE financing program that was also part of the Climate Mobilization Act, to help with some kind of low-cost financing for energy efficient upgrades. And so we focus on that kind of very broadly. And I'd say the areas we really focus on, because I think they're areas that can be really challenging, is around multifamily housing. And we do a lot of work, even though most affordable housing isn't necessarily directly being required about the carbon emission limits. There are some upgrades that are required by the law. And in general, I think looking forward, there's just a lot that can be done in that space. So we do a lot of work in affordable housing as well, but in multifamily housing. And then I think the other piece that we've been doing more work on, and that we're coming out with a lot more resources around, actually, are around commercial tenants. Because Local Law 97 really just affects building owners in terms of who has to pay the fine. And when it comes especially to commercial buildings, typically the kind of what they call the base building, the part of the building where the owner actually controls the amount of energy that used, can often be 40% of the energy use, whereas more like 50 or 60% of the energy use is by the people who are renting the spaces, the tenants. And they aren't really required to do anything by this law.
Interesting.
But there's a lot that they can do either with simple retrofits or by working with the owners. So we're coming out with a lot of resources to help those commercial tenants understand the opportunity, and it's better for the people who work for them. And, some of their kind of workers are going to be demanding or already demanding some of these things. So, so there's a lot of work to be done in that space.
Yeah.
And then I think the third thing that we are focusing on, and this kind of comes back around to Vancouver a little bit, and Sean Pander is, Sean did pass some really aggressive and interesting regulations that have really driven Passive House in Vancouver really effectively. It's been exciting to see. One of the things he was excited about when he came to New York was seeing the Building Energy Exchange and seeing like this way and effort to kind of build capacity in the real estate sector. And so we did, he's like, you got to come help me figure out how to do this. And he found some money to do it. And we consulted with him, and he launched a similar organization called ZEBEX,
Yes.
the Zero Emissions Building Exchange. We were happy for the borrowing.
Absolutely.
And we did some, very informal collaboration. But then this has become, as other cities began to pass building performance regulations, it is clear that they need to support their real estate community to meet those regulations. So more and more cities are starting to kind of follow New York's lead. Washington, D.C., Boston, St. Louis, Chicago, Seattle, Washington State, actually, California are starting to really understand that they need to push these regulations to drive building efficiency. And so meeting that is not easy. It's not like turning a switch. And so we have formed a partnership with the DC-based Institute for Market Transformation, who we collaborated with on an innovation hub for DC to help other cities create hubs like BX. And we've done that now in St. Louis and Kansas City. They've actually launched BXKC and BXSTL.
Nice.
We're consulting with the city of Chicago and Illinois Green there on, some designs to create a created an initiative there, the city of Denver, and now we're looking to do a larger national initiative to help a lot of other cities. So I'd say, multifamily housing, commercial spaces, and then this kind of other project, which really is to help other cities create these resource centers.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, part of that is leveraging all the resources we have. Building science doesn't change because you leave the state of New York, right?
Right.
So I think there's a lot that we can kind of give and loan, finding the right local partner to activate the community to help, them raise the bar in their communities.
Yeah. Well, get something going in Seattle, okay?
We've been talking to them.
Yeah, good. Awesome. And I also know that you're doing a training collaboration with Passive House Network, right? And
yes,
that's like very timely and topical. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, no, we got some funding that the Passive House Network and BX, actually in Tomas, got some funding from NYSERDA to create this kind of training program where they took the Passive House certification training and essentially put it online. They webified it. And then we created this series of kind of more introductory courses. So it's kind of like this funnel of, capturing a broad audience to educate them. And then some of those go on to do the more kind of in-depth, and then some of those go on to certification courses to really spread the word about Passive House as broadly as possible and increase certification at the same time. And so those courses have all been live. They're great courses. And it's been really exciting to see the uptake. And so, we've actually, in part to kind of drive the popularity of those, we're running this kind of Passive House summer school where all of our courses are free. You go to BXEd and check it out, and you can take these courses. There are learning units associated with that, and then we hope that a lot of people will take those courses, and then some of them will get bit by the bug and they'll want to be certified, and they'll go on and take the certification course at the same time. But it's been a great collaboration, and we're super excited about the products, the courses that have come out of it.
Awesome. And we'll include a link to those resources in the show notes so listeners have a chance to connect with them. And it's cool that with this online platform, of course, you can access them from anywhere in the world. So we encourage folks to do so. I know that my time with you, I know that you have a meeting that's probably just started a few minutes ago, so we need to wrap this up. Before we do, is there anything else you'd like to add before we close?
I think one of the things I'm so glad that Zach, that you and your team and your colleagues at the accelerator are doing this. And I think this kind of goes back to both the real, the kind of secret sauce, if you will, or the driving force behind the building energy exchange, why exchange, quite frankly, is in our name. And the trip, as I explained it, going to Brussels with this group of people and meeting people who were working on this, and then getting confidence. And that group of colleagues, I'm still in touch with all of them, and we're always trading like who's doing what and resources. And I think this idea of bringing people together to better understand each other's challenges and problems, because it's not easy, and there aren't bad actors in this space, but it's just hard. And to help people demystify, debunk myths, and connect with each other, I think is just super gratifying. And it's been one of my biggest pleasures of BX is not just only building this amazing team of colleagues I work with every day, but also seeing this whole community come together and get excited, not just to come to the events, but to connect afterwards. And and seeing that happen here with the accelerator, really exponentially. And I credit you guys for doing an amazing job with that. There's so much about building this community around people working toward making a better future and better buildings for everyone, everywhere. That's just been a wonderful thing to be part of. And it's great to just see it continue to grow and accelerate exponentially.
Yeah, well said. I mean, that's very kind of you with the words about the accelerator. And BX has built such an incredible community, and it also, I know you probably feel this way. There's this kind of latent energy and desire for people who are drawn to this work to create this community as well. So it doesn't take much to catalyze that, and I feel really grateful to be part of it for sure. So thank you for sharing your insights and your wisdom and your story with us today on the podcast. This has really been wonderful, Richard. Really appreciate it.
Well, it's been my pleasure, Zach. I really appreciate it, and thanks for all the work you do too.
Well, that was a great interview. Thanks, Zach. Some really cool stuff there. I love hearing about all these organizations that are doing great work, spreading the news, spreading ideas and education about passive house, and also reaching out beyond our community as it is right now, but out into the wider industry. I really, that idea of having foundation courses for passive house, I think, has really caught on. We've heard from other providers of passive house training who do the standard training to get people to become certified, but there's this big gap in getting people even up ready to take those courses, because there's quite a lot to learn just in the building physics and building science side of things. So you're great to see that happening, and also obviously be a sustainable model for them now.
Yeah, and it's so important that BX exists in New York City at this moment, given Local Law 97. Local Law 97 is basically going to compel building owners of buildings that are 25,000 square feet or larger in New York, there are thousands and thousands of those, to meet increasingly stringent emissions caps. So they're going to need to reduce the amount of energy use that their buildings are responsible for in short order. And so there's this gap, I think, between, first of all, just building owners being aware of Local Law 97, they're going to become aware very quickly. Yeah. And then, okay, well, I don't want to have to pay a bunch of fines for emitting too much. So what are my options? And passive house is, one of those proven options to dial down the energy use. So, so there is that. And so these are folks who don't necessarily need to become certified passive house professionals, but could really use crash course in what passive house is, and some of the key basics, so that they can help be informed consumers and informed project team leaders in what's inevitably going to be thousands and thousands of deep energy retrofits in New York.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point about the codes changing pretty rapidly now. I mean, we're getting close to when some of these targets are going to kick in, and I'm seeing that here as well, where there are people who aren't necessarily aware of that, or at least maybe heard about it but don't fully understand the implications of it. In our case, it's around carbon reporting. Things are kicking in as of the end of this financial year, so mid 2023. It's going to have big implications, and there's only a handful of people that even have heard about that. So I think some of the industry is in for a bit of a shock. One thing, he pulled out a stat early on saying that I think it was buildings in New York account for about 70% of emissions. This is an interesting statistic, because the international accepted figure is around 40%. But that is when you account for everything, including transport, agriculture, and industry. And it makes sense that in a city like New York, where you don't have farms and it's much denser, and buildings are a much larger part of that space, then the contribution from those buildings to emissions is far greater. So the impact, if you're involved in anything to do with buildings, is far higher in those urban centres. So, I mean, in our case in New Zealand, it's actually it's lower. It's about 20% because we have a lot of farms. We've got a lot of cows and sheep. But it would be similar if we ring fence just around a major urban centre,
right?
That the proportion of that goes up. So that what that means for us and people, everyone in this community, is that we have a much bigger impact in cities.
Yeah, right. And you definitely see that in other cities as well in North America. It's not it's certainly it's not specific to New York City.
Yeah. And the other thing which he said that building physics doesn't change in referring to taking the education out to different places, sharing that knowledge with different organizations, or reusing stuff that's been taught for 20 years now, or course material. That's the great thing about building physics in general, building science, and also passive house, is that the physics doesn't change. How we implement it may change with new materials and systems, but the fundamentals, they're still the same.
Yeah. I was, and I think I alluded to this when we had our conversation last week with Mary and with Michael, but I was surprised by his Seattle roots, Richard's Seattle roots. I wasn't aware of those. And so I know that there were a lot of names that we were bandying about of Seattle people and educators and practitioners here. But I think that I was just really struck by how this centers of thought and excellence in building practice can kind of evolve and influence other centers, and then those can come back and feed off of one another. And so I was heartened to hear about some of the kind of thought leaders that Richard learned from in the 90s and early 2000s here in Seattle, and then he's gone deeper in his work in New York. And I feel like there are insights that he then can, I'm hoping that he, with Building Energy Exchange and with the ZEBEX, the Zero Energy Building Exchange in Vancouver, BC, can bring back to Seattle. I think that there's stuff that we could learn here. And I just feel like it's cool to see those kinds of in this case, continental, but it also, we know from other episodes, this global kind of sharing that happens over time. It's good to remember that that's possible and that it happens.
Absolutely. And nice for and acknowledgement of NYSERDA as well, and obviously the work that they've done.
No kidding.
Which is just sounds incredible. How much investment and momentum they've put into everything from Accelerator, of course, supporting, but also all the other activities they've got going on.
Yeah, well, that Buildings of Excellence program is huge at NYSERDA, and learned, I think, took some really important cues from Brussels. I mean, so many stories go back to the Brussels example. It's so impactful. So many ripples coming from the work that the fine folks in Brussels started decades ago. Yeah.
Very good. Hey, well, thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Really great stuff. What have we got going on?
Well, in August, we are at the Accelerator, where we take August off for our live programming. But we're ramping up for a really busy fall. Lots going on. In the meantime, speaking of the Building Energy Exchange, they're hosting what they're calling the Passive House Summer School. So now through the end of August, you can take a range of courses online on Passive House design for free through BX. So you can visit their events calendar for upcoming live deliveries at be-exchange.org, or take any course on demand for free with the coupon code PH Summer until August 31st. So this is a chance to get your feet wet with Passive House Design at Building Energy Exchange. And now they have a new Passive House construction primer that's tailored for contractors and tradespeople. So if you are a contractor or tradespeople person, or have contacts with contractors and tradespeople, please let them know about this resource.
They also have some great case studies. I think it's got some amazing stuff on their website as well. So
it's
be-exchange.org. I think I found it just searching Building Energy Exchange, and you'll end up there. We'll put some links in the show notes as well. But go and check it out.
Indeed.
Also, another reminder that you have until September the 2nd to submit your abstract for the 26th International Passive House Conference, which will be taking place in March in Wiesbaden. Did I say that right?
It sounds, it was convincing.
That's good. It's back in Germany, so in March 2023. If you're keen to present there, then get your abstracts in. Should be a good one. Back to hopefully good attendance of people meeting in person.
Indeed.
We've got the Passive House Hui happening coming up this weekend, so that probably will have gone by the time we this goes out. But some good things continuing down this part of the world as well. And I know that Australian Passive House has got a whole bunch of events coming up too.
Awesome. Well, have a good Hui.
All right. I think that does us for this week.
Great. Thanks, Matthew. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. And we'll be back again next week on the Passive House Podcast.